Coming.
Recharging my shield.
Behind you, behind you, behind you.
Down.
Double timing it. Giving him the chimney. Give me a sec. Recharging shield. Reloading. Got a target.
Let's go.
Whole squad taken out.
How did I get here?
Hey, what's going on, Champ Squad? My name is sanity if you guys are new, and welcome back to another Apex Legends video. So now that we're past the halfway mark of Season 6, I figured that I'd make an updated Legends ranking list. Since the beginning of Season 6, there's been a bunch of Legend balancing changes that have come into the game, so I definitely think the Legend meta has shifted. Real quick, before we hop into the tier list, if you're new, I upload educational Apex videos and high kill gameplays, so if this sounds like it can interest you, consider dropping a like, subscribing, and turn post notifications on. We're basically en route to 500 subs at this point, so it would really mean a lot. I'm planning on starting to play with subscribers in the near future, so stay tuned. So I'm just going to go through each of the Legends alphabetically and place them in the tier that I think they belong in, and in the background I'll have a 3k damage, 15 kill gameplay that I think you guys will enjoy. So to kick things off, she's probably my wild card, but I think Bangalore is an A tier Legend. I'm a Bang main, so I'm probably a bit biased, but I do think the ceiling is really high for Bangalore, and that if you're a decent player who knows how to use her double time effectively, you can quickly engage and disengage from fights really well. I also think her ultimate can function as a huge stun grenade that can push your opponents off of you, or finish off a kill after you get a knock. I've definitely been seeing a lot more Bangalore mains recently, and with consistent nerfs to Wraith, I think Bang is now potentially one of the best, if not the best, mobile Legends with her smokes and double time. So next up, we've got Bloodhound, and I'm also going to be putting him as A tier. Bloodhound was a top 3 Legend at the start of the season in my opinion, after receiving gigantic buffs that really make his ultimate feel like God mode. His scans can also travel extremely far, and give your team a big edge in fights by having eyes on every one of your opponents, making tracking a lot easier. Seeing that he's also now able to scan survey beacons, I'd argue he's probably the best recon Legend in the game currently, ahead of Crypto and Pathfinder. Bloodhound did end up getting a pretty minor nerf recently, making it that so there's a slight increase in cooldown for his scans when he's in his ultimate, but if I'm not mistaken, I think he can still scan like every 8 seconds or so, which is really fast. In my opinion, he's still a top tier Legend after this patch, and he belongs in the A tier. So Caustic is next up in line alphabetically, and I'm also going to be placing him in A tier. I know there's been a lot of top Legends so far, but I will say I think the Legends are as balanced as they've ever been this season, with the power gap between the best and worst Legends being narrower than it's ever been. I gotta say, I think Caustic is just a really big nuisance to play against. I feel like I die to him more than any other Legend. His gas canisters are just such an effective deterrent to close off buildings, and can also be used to build yourself some cover when the situation calls for it. When you combine this with his fortified perk, which reduces incoming damage, and his gas bomb ultimate, Caustic is just a tank, and in my opinion, he's the best defensive Legend in the game. I used to think Wattson had a slight edge over Caustic, but I think Caustic is able to better hold down a building because his canisters can block doors in kind of a less obvious way compared to Wattson fences. They're also harder to shoot out, and I think his gas bomb ultimate can really change the outcome of a fight. So next up in line, we've got Crypto, who I'm putting as B tier. I think Crypto is definitely a really solid Legend when used properly, but there's just such a high skill gap when it comes to playing him. There's really a pretty high bar of entry to being able to play him successfully. He definitely isn't a beginner's Legend, but for someone who knows how to play Crypto well, he has so much utility for the team in scouting as well as using his EMPs in gunfights. Some people might place him higher because of this, but for me, I think Crypto is solid B tier. So next up we have the Chungus himself, Gibraltar. I had to really think about where to place Gibby. I was considering putting him S tier, but ended up deciding to put him in A tier. I think Gibby is just an absolute tank. Between his gun shield adding an additional 50 health and his fortified perk reducing incoming damage, he's just an absolute sponge who soaks up clip after clip without dropping. I also think his dome provides a ton of team utility because it's basically instant on the go cover and also speeds your healing and reses. I think Gibby's an all around beast even with his giant hitbox, and a decent Gibby literally takes an extra clip to drop and can give any team a big edge in their gunfights. Alright, so next up on the list we have Lifeline. In my opinion, Lifeline is without a doubt an S tier Legend. Last season, when auto-res was introduced into the game, I think it completely redefined just how good of a support Legend Lifeline is. A good Lifeline who knows how to trail her 2 teammates at their back, never getting knocked first, is more useful to a team than any other Legend in my opinion. She can completely change the dynamics of a fight when she drops her res because it forces the enemies to make a decision about whether to push in aggressively to finish their knock, or to stay back and wait and have to deal with another opponent. I think a Lifeline who knows how to use her shield as cover can really take advantage of that moment of indecision, where the opposing team doesn't know whether to ape or to stay back. Give her a gold bag and it's pretty much over. That team has such an edge over any other team in the game. She's also got a pretty tiny hitbox just like Wraith, so it's pretty tough to bring her down. I think right now Lifeline is pretty much the queen of Apex. So next up we've got Loba. I'm going to have to put Loba as C tier. I know she just got a buff to her ultimate where she can basically drop a black market within a minute of landing, but I still think looting will always kind of be an underwhelming legend ability. It's something we all have to do, so it's definitely convenient to be able to loot faster, but I just think an ultimate that offers more direct utility in a gunfight will always be better in improving your chances to win. I still think Loba's tactical animation is also way too slow compared to other mobility options such as Wraith's Phase or even Bangalore's Smoke, which provide just better, more rapid escapes from fights. I still think she's viable and have come across some pretty good Lobas, but for me, she's C tier. So next up we've got Mirage. I think for a short while after the rework to Mirage, a lot more people started to pick him up and play him, but it seems like his usage has gone back down and not that many people are choosing to play with him. I think Mirage is honestly kind of slept on and that people underestimate how good he is because there's definitely a skill gap to playing him. He's got a ton of potential, but it seems like newer or less skilled players tend to gravitate towards him, so I think he gets associated as a lower tier legend. But I think a good Mirage who knows how to use his ultimate and invisible revive abilities can really be a force to be reckoned with, so I'm going to put him at B tier. So now moving on to Octane, I'm going to put Octane at C tier. Even after receiving consecutive buffs, making him the fastest legend in Apex, I think he's still just in need of a bit more of an upgrade to compete with the top legends on the list. His stim not only takes away health, but it also telegraphs where you are from super far away. I also think his jump pads are pretty fun, but they're just not that useful to the team. It's still not that hard to get lasered off them, even with the double jump mechanic that's been introduced. So for me, Octane's still C tier, kind of bottom of the hierarchy. So next up in line we've got Pathfinder, who I'm going to put in B tier. I've said this multiple times before, but I'm pretty convinced Respawn has some sort of personal vendetta against Pathfinder. Not only did they initially reduce his grapple cooldown to 35 seconds, they also literally gave his survey beacon scanning abilities to the two other recon legends. It seems like Respawn just doesn't like Pathfinder and has tried to strip him for everything he's worth, but there's been a lot of outrage and complaints about this. So they're kind of trying to do right to Pathfinder, I guess, by modifying his cooldown based on travel distance of the grapple. But it hasn't really been the buff people have been kind of hoping for. There's this huge bug where the shoulder blocks half of the screen, and it actually ends up taking longer for the cooldown based on how the distance you travel because of this reset. But even with all these issues, I'm going to put Pathfinder in B tier. I think a good grapple to reposition in a fight can really kind of redefine the outcome of that fight, and I also think his ziplines do offer pretty decent team utility. So next up in line, I'm going to place the Season 6 legend Rampart in C tier. I think when Rampart first came into the game, I just thought she was kind of annoying because everyone was playing her, so there were barricades and miniguns everywhere, and it was definitely pretty hard to assess how good she was. But now, after a bit more time to play with and against her, I gotta say I think she's definitely one of the weaker legends in the game currently. Her barricades can be useful in certain circumstances, especially to seal off doors, but I think her ultimate is pretty useless. It's just really easy to detect, it's super loud, and the red laser is really obvious to see from a distance. I think she's going to need some sort of rework or bigger buff, but for now I think she belongs in C tier. Next up on the list, I'm going to put Revenant in B tier. I think Revenant's pretty good, especially in the rank scene. His death totem basically offers your team a free push without consequences, which is really useful, especially when you're third partying. I also think his L1 ability, the silencer, is kind of broken because in my opinion, when you're silenced, it's super disorienting and can really lower your chances of winning a gunfight. I'm going to leave him at B tier because I just think, he's really good, but his mobility is kind of bad. His hitbox is pretty easy to hit in my opinion. I just think there's a set of legends that's a little bit better than him, but I say he's probably the best B tier legend. So next up we got Wattson, and I'm also going to put her in B tier. I used to think Wattson was the best defensive legend in the game, and that she was pretty meta, especially in the earlier seasons, but I think recently she's been surpassed by Caustic. Her fences are definitely still an effective way of kind of closing off buildings, but I think they're just more obvious and easier to shoot out than Caustic's traps, and they're also a little bit less disorienting than being hit by the gas. So I think she's still good. I think she's a pretty good legend, pretty solid B tier, but I think Caustic's just a better option defensively. Finally, last but not least, we got Wraith. So Wraith has just been meta for so long with up to 30% usage. Pretty much every team had a Wraith on it, and every sweat tended to gravitate towards her. But I think with consistent nerfs, first to her tactical and now to her running animation, she's finally been knocked off of her pedestal just a little bit. She's still really solid. I even think if they stripped her of all of her abilities, she'd still probably be a top 5 legend, because she's just got such a tiny hitbox, she's so slippery and hard to hit. But I don't think Wraith is God tier anymore. There's other legends that are on a similar level, and I'm going to put her as A tier. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for my legend tier list for midway through Season 6. I'm going to post all the tiers now on the screen for you guys to see, and within each tier, I'm going to rank each legend within that tier from best to worst, from left to right. This is obviously just my opinion, you guys are entitled to your own, and let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.